He's joining us now. E.W. Jackson, you know him. He's president of the Stand Network. He's also of the Stand organization. He was the nominee for lieutenant governor in Virginia in 2013. He's ran for U.S. Senate, and he's been a surrogate for President Trump for a very long time, one of the most trusted people inside the Trump movement. But he speaks the truth. And he's with us now, and he's waiting to go to the dentist, so he squeezed us in. EW, Happy New Year, Merry Christmas to you and your family. Great to have you with us.
Well, thank you so much, John, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you. Of course, Christmas is in the rearview mirror now, but we're looking forward to another one in December. And thank you, John, for the compliments on the piece. I mean, I didn't think I was writing, a Pulitzer Prize-winning commentary, but I just saw just sharing my heart and my concern about people not realizing we still have a moment in front of us that has to be seized, and we can't waste it in despair and discouragement.
Well, I want to start with your comments. Here's what gripped me. You said, this is no time for despair. This is no time for discouragement. And this is certainly no time for violence. Now is the time to use every constitutional prerogative at our disposal to peacefully fight for the future of our country. And then you go on from there. You want to elaborate a little bit about your comments in your op-ed?
Well, sure. Look, because there's a lot of controversy about Antifa infiltrating the Trump rally in Washington, D.C. Day before yesterday. We now have a police officer who's dead during that thing. And what I said was, it really, in the end, it doesn't matter so much who did it. That's going to get sorted out. The important thing is that we understand we can't, as conservatives, we can't waste our time on things that only hurt our cause. We've got to focus on the future and how we save our country. And so I'm not interested in trying to go back and rehearse and reenact the past. I'm interested in figuring out how do we stop a Stacey Abrams, for example, who is indoctrinating black and minority voters with big money from George Soros and Mike Bloomberg and Tom Steyer, and working all over the country with Texas targeted next. I had a conversation with Senator Ted Cruz not too long ago about some of this. And look, we had better wake up and get our hands firmly on the steering wheel of this thing. We're going to look up one day and realize that the firewall of blue states, of red states, is going to have turned into a blue flame, and we're going to all get burned.
Well, EW, you and I have lived through this firsthand in Virginia together, right? I mean, when I first came to Virginia, I came to Virginia in 2010, and I started a radio show. This is actually my 10-year anniversary week since I started, January 2nd, 2011 or 2012, something like that. Whatever 2010, whatever 10 is, I guess it was 2010 is when I started. And Virginia was a swing state. Obama had won it in 2008 for the first time since I think Lyndon Johnson in '64, but then immediately we had a Republican governor, and the Republicans won everything, and so it was a kind of a swing state, leaning red. 10 years later, it's California, and there's nowhere to change it. And in this recent election, on paper, we lost by 450,000 votes. I mean, that is a landslide. We got crushed. And so you look at that, and now you go to Georgia, and you got the same thing happening. And so how do you stop it?
Well, look, I think there's two things we've got to do. One is I think that the left, frankly, has been way ahead of us. I shared in that article, in that piece, I believe I shared this. I read a piece 10 years ago by a guy named Ron Brownstein writing for the Atlanta Journal saying that the Democrats can take Georgia. Now, 10 years ago, nobody thought that Georgia was going to go Democrat. But they saw it. And what they saw was the changing demographics and a strategy that has since been enshrined into a book called Brown is the New White by Steve Phillips, who is, part of this heir to the Wachovia, I believe it's the Wachovia family's fortune. married into it and is using his money to do exactly what George Soros and these other billionaires are doing. And he said basically the changing demographics of the country mean, and I hate to put it this starkly, but this is their language, John, not mine. We don't need white working class people. We don't need them. Write them off. All we need is progressive whites and the combination of minorities in some of these critical states, and we've got what he calls the new American majority. And by the way, that's the strategy that they employed in Virginia in order to register a whole bunch of new voters. I think they registered something like 300,000 new voters over a 2 or 3 year period. And they're going to use Stacey Abrams to try to do this around the country. And we've got a better answer for minorities than liberals ever have, because they don't have anything but racial demagoguery and rhetoric and no progress. And we've got principles that can actually help people climb out of poverty, get a better education, do the things that will make life better for themselves, their children, their entire family. And frankly, in my view, the Republican Party has sat on our hands and really not bothered to take that message aggressively into these communities and compete for those votes.
So what do we do now?
Well, I think what we got to do now is, frankly, a bunch of us have got to sit down and start talking about how we finance an effort to do two things, really. One, we got to clean up our election process, because here again, the left took full advantage of COVID, and I really believe that there was a lot of cheating. I don't think that's the only problem we had, but I think cheating was a major part of the problem that we had with these new rules that were not even legal because the legislature did not pass them or implement them. They just came about a whole cloth because we got COVID and we've got these emergency powers and we got to do this, that, and the other. Just send everybody a mail-in ballot. And I think it was an utter disaster for conservatives because we simply weren't ready for it, and it overwhelmed us. But the second thing we've got to do is, look, we got to look at Texas right now, because if anybody in the sound of my voice, I want you to hear me and hear me well. They are planning to take Texas. They think that with the Hispanic voters, if they can radicalize them and then mobilize them, and with the black vote and other minorities that they're cobbling together as quote-unquote people of color, if they can put all of those together and get these urban centers, Austin and Dallas and Houston, that have already gone completely liberal, they think that they can take Texas. And if John, better than I do, if they take Texas, that's ball game. And so we simply can't let that happen. My organization is going to be working in battleground states, particularly those with significant minority votes, in an off-election year where there's no election, going in and educating these people about how they're being manipulated and race is being used to have them vote for things that are contrary to their best interests and the best interests of their children. I mean, think about it, John. Has the left delivered on education for poor and minority people?
No.
It's absolutely not even close.
No.
And yet they keep getting their votes.
Well, and what was stunning to a lot of people is President Trump in this past cycle got a bigger share of the Hispanic vote than ever. He got 42%. He got a 50% increase in the black vote. If you told me going into November 3rd that he would get 13% of the black vote, 42% of the Hispanic vote, I would have said he'd win in a landslide. What happened?
Look, I mean, I don't think there's any question about it. That, when you tell me that Joe Biden got more black votes than Barack Obama, I just say, okay, fine. What's next? To sell me a bridge in Brooklyn? Mm-hmm. Something strange went on in this election, and I think it's a combination of using these mail-in ballots in a fraudulent way. But look, let's get back to this point. The President Trump did something that virtually no Republican has ever done. He made a direct appeal to these communities. He said, I am for you. And in spite of all the rhetoric, calling him a racist, calling him xenophobic, every name you can think of, in spite of all of that, he substantially increased his support from the black community. The message that ought to be for Republicans, establishment, conservative, otherwise, ought to be, it is worth the investment to go after these voters. I don't think it costs that much, but it just requires some attention. And so, we've got to do both of those. We got to clean up this election system and not not allow ourselves to get cheated out of it. And I know there are a lot of people who think that's all there was, and I think that was a big part of it. But I don't think that's all there is, because if it's true that they registered 100,000 new voters in Georgia between the general election and the special election, the runoff on January 5th, I mean, man, that's extraordinary. But we can do that, and we can do it better. But we just got to put the resources and the attention and the time into it. And that's what our organization is going to do over the next several years, John. We're going to dedicate ourselves to that, because I think without that, the demographic changes in the country mean that ultimately, see, they like to racialize things. Well, what they're really saying is, we don't need voters with traditional values. We don't need voters who believe in capitalism and free enterprise. We don't need voters who believe in individual liberty or believe in life or believe in family. We need progressives, and we can always radicalize people of color, because we can tell them that they're victims of white supremacy and white privilege and all of that. And we've kind of got a blank check with them by simply scaring the daylights out of them that the Republicans and the conservatives are a bunch of white people out to get you.
Unbelievable. John Fredericks Radio Network. We're live in Atlanta. We're with E.W. Jackson. E.W. Jackson, the President's Stand, just started a new organization. E.W., the name of your new organization again?
Well, it's a PAC. It's a super PAC. It's called Stand America PAC. And that is what we are using. Of course, I'm operating for the educational side of this, because 501c3s can do voter education. So we can't support candidates, of course, and we can't do so much lobbying. But we're going to do a major voter education push into these communities as well. I'm putting together an advisory board of people from all backgrounds, because, as you know, John, I'm not interested in dividing and segregating us. I'm interested in bringing us together, because this is one America, and it will work for all of us, regardless of the color of a person's skin. So I'm putting together an advisory board for this effort of people from all backgrounds who can speak authentically to some of these communities that the left is trying to segregate. They're trying to say, and you know the weird thing is, Hondurans and Mexicans are really two different groups of people with two different backgrounds, and their cultures are not the same, but the left says you're all Hispanic, that's all that matters. I mean, it's really ridiculous, but that's what they do. And they want to segregate everybody into their little defined victim group. And we want to break that up, but at the same time have folks speak to these communities that they can hear and understand and know that they can relate. I always say, I can say things that Republicans can't say, white Republicans can't say, because I grew up in the ghetto, I was raised in foster care, I was born into poverty, and I've seen the beauty of this nation and what it can do for anybody who is willing to just go to work and stay out of trouble and not have children before you're married and just do some basic things. And you can live a wonderful life in the United States of America. I can't think of one instance, John, in which racism has ever held me back from doing anything. Does racism exist? Sure, it's out there, but it's not an impediment. It's not an absolute impediment to anybody's progress in this country any more than anti-Italian sentiment and anti-Irish sentiment and anti-Jewish sentiment was an impediment to them. So it's time to sell the message of what America is to people who have been sold a lie, and tell them, listen, you hit the proverbial lottery, my friend, when you were born a citizen of the greatest nation in the history of mankind.
So I get what you're doing in Texas and Georgia, and I think that is the absolute thing to do, and it certainly starts. The General Assembly convening on Monday in Georgia, their top priority is voter reform, getting rid of these mail-in ballots, getting rid of election season, making it election day or election week, instead of, we start voting in July and it ends in a week after the election. I mean, the absurdity of what went on in this election, and how the Democrats and Stacey Abrams just ran rings around the Republicans who are feckless, is unbelievable. Let's get to, we got a couple of callers I want to merge you in with. Let's get to John in Pennsylvania. John, you're on with E.W. Jackson, line 4.
John.
Hey.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It sounds like you've got a real plan there, and I think you're right on with Texas.
Yep.
That's a problem.
Oh, and I tell you, look, I've got relatives in Texas, and they are on pins and needles looking. Of course, now here's one great thing we've got going in Texas. We've got Alan West, who is the chairman of the Texas Republican Party. Alan West is a fighter. He's a man of courage, and he's a brilliant organizer. So I've got a lot of hope that Texas will see the handwriting on the wall and, under his leadership, take whatever action is needed to make sure that Texas remains bright, bold red.
Well, go ahead.
I've got a point here, and I brought it up yesterday with John. We've got 75 million at least extremely frustrated patriots in this country who've basically watched a stolen election or a coup, and the Communist Chinese Party is behind this. If you trace it back, you watch War Room, you study this, you look at the numbers, you look at the details, you look at the facts.
Right.
The Communist Chinese Party is behind this. All right, so the Communist Chinese Party needs a couple things to function to keep China going. They need to keep all their people employed, and they also need the largest market in the world to sell their products into. Now, the people that need to buy those products are the 75 million people, or a lot of them are 75 million people in the United States that just had their their government stolen from them.
Right.
So there's a lot of frustration out there, and I think what boiled over on the 6th was frustration because the elected officials are not listening, or they've been misguided by lobbyists and communist Chinese infiltrators, and there's documents where they've infiltrated our government, our universities, our corporations, and so they need a place to release. They need something to do. They need to feel that's the solution. That's part of the solution. What you're doing is extremely important, but we need to work on this thing in multiple fronts simultaneously.
All right, John, let's give we're short on time. Great point. Let's give E.W. Jackson a chance to respond to John, basically saying the frustration bubbled over Wednesday, E.W.
Look, we're all frustrated. Let me just speak to that quickly. George Washington lost more battles than he won, but he won the most important battle. He won the victory in the war. At Yorktown, it was determined. We've got to understand that our country has never had an easy time dealing with our challenges. I mean, we had a civil war in this country. We've gone through some traumatic situations. The difference between us and other countries is we don't give up. We don't give up on each other. We don't give up on our institutions. So I'm frustrated, too. I mean, I don't like what's going on here, but we got to turn that frustration to peaceful, determined action. And we got to remember that we're heirs of somebody like George Washington, whose attitude was, I don't quit till I win. That's it. We don't quit till we win. Now, you're right. We've got to do this on multiple fronts. We're not the only ones who will be doing it. We know other organizations will. I plan to work with Ralph Reed and work with some others across the country in order to get this done. But you're right. We've got to be operating on multiple fronts. I'd encourage people, John, to go to our website, standamerica.us, and check us out, make a contribution, or do whatever you can do. But sign up so that we can get in touch with you and keep you informed of what we're doing.
E.W., I want to thank you, and I want to thank John. Great observation. We're out of time for this segment. E.W. Jackson, great to have you. Great commentary, op-ed piece yesterday, E.W. We're going to be running that tonight in thevirginiastar.com, so you can get it there. Also in Georgia Star News. E.W. Jackson,
John.
outstanding
God bless
work.
you, brother.